Alright, we got a new video here. Electronic mechanics back at work again. Got a 05, well, 04 Honda Civic EX. This is my daily driver, was my daily driver. Last few weeks I've been driving that Lincoln. In the past couple videos, I've been driving it to work just because this one has a rear main seal leak and goes through a quart of oil about once a week, just dumping it out the bottom. So we're gonna pull the motor and a tranny and separate the two and try to fix this oil leak. First things first, drain the coolant. Second thing is I drained the transmission because you have to pop the axles out of the transmission. I disconnected the exhaust at the right there, right at the bottom of the header where the downpipe bolts to the header. That's disconnected. Once the coolant's drained, the next thing will be to get some of this accessory drive out of the way. Probably remove the alternator, take out the battery, the intake, undo the harness through the firewall, take off the shift cables and the clutch hydraulic cylinder, and disconnect these wires here from the motor, the starter wires. For the most part, the harness will come out with the motor, the engine harness. The AC compressor will have to disconnect down under there and kind of sit off to the side. Undo the radiator hoses and anything else that might be hooked up. This O2 sensor here. Anything else, the throttle cables, the cruise control cables, anything that connects the engine to the car, we're gonna have to get rid of. These heater hoses back here that connect, and then the motor mounts. So I'm gonna pull this motor and tranny out the top. It's easier that way, pull them out together. That way you don't have to mess with the cross member, or the subframe, whatever everybody wants to call it, and then have to worry about realignment. So this is step one: drain the coolant, and I drained the tranny fluid already and popped the axles out. They don't come all the way out, but I popped them loose. So when I undo the ball joints, I can get the axles out of the tranny all the way. And the thing is I'm gonna pull this apart, pull the motor and tranny out, and then I'm gonna make it a roller basically, so I can roll it out of the shop if need be until I get the motor back in it. So here we go. All right, we're gonna disconnect the battery, disconnect the positive and negative, 10 millimeter, 10 millimeter. Normally you only have to undo the one side and it'll just unhook. That's your battery hold down. I don't know how long it's gonna be. This car is gonna be undone, but I'm gonna use this bin as a catch-all for all the parts that gets pulled off. That's the thing that I do: grab an empty bin, throw everything that I pull off the car, and it makes life easier. So, you can grab the battery, pull it out, pull out the plastic battery tray. This battery tray out, the metal part of the tray. That right there, I'm gonna take that out. They're 12s. Yeah, like I said, they're 12s. And they go on the floor. Now, there's 2 bolts on the lower side that get bolted in. I'll show you here. They kind of slide into these hooks. Well, as you can see, I don't tighten mine. I just slide it in, put the 2 top in, because I've had this car apart many times. And I'll take the bolts and put them back in the holes. Fuse box, I'll take this cover off. Yeah. Take these two bolts out here. I think they're like 8 millimeters. Yeah. Then the main power wires can go with the motor. Yeah, they're 8 millimeter. Take these out and they can go, they'll come out with the motor. They go over to the starter. And they kind of just kind of walk them out the front. Put these bolts back. Just so you don't lose them. Just put them back in there. It's easier. Alright, put the lid back on. If you guys don't have a stereo in your car, you probably won't have any of this messy wiring. But I like tunes, so my car's got some stereo wires. But what I'll do is I'll just undo this hot from there, from this breaker. If you do have stereos in your car, check your connections from time to time, because that one was kind of loose. Now this part of the harness here can go with the motor when it comes out. Okay, we still got some power on there. I forgot that I have capacitors in the trunk, and they are still hot. I should go disconnect them. So yeah, if you have a stereo and you have capacitors in your trunk, you might want to disconnect them before you go do this. Alright, so we're back. I went in the trunk and just pulled the two fuses that feed up to these wires here. These wires feed back to two big fuses, and then it goes into the capacitors. That's undone. So crisis averted for now. Back to our 10 millimeter. And we'll undo this. Undo these ground wires here. Right here, there's a ground. This is a ground I added to help with the stereo. Upgrading the big three, and then you have your chassis ground here. So just undo those. Basically, you just want to disconnect anything that connects the motor and tranny to the car. So I'm going to pull this ground completely off. It's seen better days. Probably just make a new one of them. And I always like putting the bolts back where they were. It's just something I've always done. Alright, now I'm going to undo this 10 millimeter here. That holds on this intake, and it also holds on the hydraulic line for the clutch master cylinder. Alright, that'll allow me to get the intake out of here. I'm going to undo a bolt there, and that I'm just going to take the whole intake off. 5/16 hose clamp. Your car probably won't or might have an intake like this. If it has the factory one, there's a lot more little things that you have to take off. You get the idea. Pop that temp sensor out of there. The other part falls down. Now this hydraulic line for the clutch you can kind of move out of your way, but there's another ground here for the chassis. So it's another 10 millimeter. Most of the stuff on this car, small connection wise, is 10 millimeter. the throttle linkages. Here, back there. 10mm nut. Another 10mm nut. These just pop off. This is for your cruise control. I just like putting everything back where it was. Makes life easier. And then back here, there's 2 bolts that go into the intake that hold the hold your throttle cables. You just undo them from the throttle plate, and you can see that they're just cable ends. You just kind of roll them around and undo them, and that's your throttle cables. And those, I just tuck them up under the wiper blades so they're up out of the way, and they'll hold them up out of the way. These 2 bolts here, I put them back in through the intake back here where these AC lines you're going to have to disconnect from the motor, so you might as well just do it now while you got your 10mm. There's a 10mm down in here. And that holds this bracket here. And what you can do is pry this back and actually just undo this bracket completely and get it out of the way. And that'll help you later. You can push this stuff out of your way. Now there's another mount here from the motor. And move it out of the way. Put your bolt back in. And what I like to do, just to give yourself some room, is take that off. But try not to drop it. I'm gonna undo these hoses. Might as well. Gonna have to undo them anyway. So when these hoses are stuck on, I like to take a pick and stick it behind here, and you can kind of work it around and get them broke loose, and then they'll pull off like that. Go. Those are, what I like to do is kind of like shove them and tuck them out of the way. That way they're not all up in your grill while you're trying to work. So that's done. Now we're going to disconnect this O2 sensor. Just a simple plug. And then I'll just lay that down out of the way. And now it's just 2 bolts here to undo this clutch slave cylinder. I think I called it a master cylinder earlier, but it's the slave cylinder. And I'm still going to call it a slave cylinder because that's what it is. The media might not like that, but I ain't here to make anybody happy. Get 12mm and 3/8 drive. My dog don't like storms, that's funny. So that, and you just pull this slave cylinder out of here, like that. And this stays with the car. So you just kind of want to, I just kind of like tuck it up into the fender up here out of the way. These shifter cables can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Basically, you're gonna undo them from here and here with these little cotter pins. Well, they're not cotter pins, but they're little hook pins. From the factory, they might be cotter pins. I put these in years ago when I first had this tranny out. It's just easier to put them in. And you're gonna want to pull them off. And what I do is I like to put this stuff right back on. Put your pins back in. And that way that stuff doesn't get lost. Alright, now there's 3 bolts that hold this bracket from the cables to the transmission. And I believe they're 12s, and they are. So we can use the same setup that we used to do the transmission slave cylinder. Pull these out. Well,
similar setup. Alright, try it again.
once you get the bolts completely unthreaded, then this whole assembly will lift off. And I'm going to take the bolts out of it just so they don't get lost, because it's going to stay with the car. And I'll get a little bungee, and I'll just bungee this up tight to the car. Kind of something like that. But for now, I'm going to leave it just hanging here. So, now we have to undo our fuel lines. This car has a return line system. So, this is the return line, and this is the feed. Pop this little cap off, this little safety cap. And there's a quick fitting there. Just gonna slide this little clamp back. Undo this return line. You can kind of tuck it up here, or shove it down in here, just so it stays out of your way. Now this line here, you got to pinch these little green things, and it should come right off. But I'm gonna put a rag around it just to try to catch whatever might be there. I'm not quite sure if there's going to be pressure here or not. Not bad. So that just kind of pops off and the little clip stays on there. And the same thing with this, is you can kind of just find a place to tuck it out of the way. So undo this heater hose here. Take your hook. Now you might get some coolant leaking, so just be ready. Kind of get to the clamp from under heat. There's where you're going to lose all your coolant. These coolant lines can be routed up out of the way here. Alright, there's a vacuum line on the back of the intake for the brake booster. It goes down right under the throttle body. Do not, I repeat, do not forget to undo it when you go to pull the motor, because you'll break that nipple off the back of the intake. You'll be screwed. Ask me how I find out. How I found out. Learn things the hard way, I do. Alright, now we got to get some of this accessory drive stuff off here. Starting with the power steering pump and work our way down. So, take off this tensioner. Oh, man. That's a 12mm. Holds this tensioner. Go ahead and remove it completely. I'm going to do this, try to do this. I've done it before. I leave the air conditioning compressor connected. That way I don't have to recharge the system. Pop the belt out of your way. Yeah. I don't even care that the nut fell. They have this proprietary bolt. Now you can take this whole assembly and just get it up out of your way. Alright, now we're going to move into this wheel well. Take this cover off. Take your little tool here. Hey look, there's our bracket from earlier. And the bolt we dropped. And I just kind of tuck that out of the way. All good. Power steering belt, get that out of the way. So basically what we're trying to do here is this bolt right there is the one you need to loosen. That's the that adjuster bolt's a 12mm. So what I do is I take the whole bracket off, and that allows me to move the starter or move the alternator around a lot more than if you didn't take the bracket off. Now we can take our belt off. Alright, I got the alternator out. It's pretty easy. It's just one plug and your hot wires. You'll probably only have one. Alright, to get the bottom AC compressor bolts, you gotta take this lower valence off. And as you can see, mine's held on with zip ties. falls off, just like that. These two last bolts right here and right there. Yeah, they're in the best spot that you could ever imagine them to be in. I have a 3/8 12mm socket, but I have this 3/8 extension that's only, I don't know, 1.5 inches long. That thing gets me into the worst places, but in a good way. I don't got the one out. Alright, once you got your AC compressor unbolted, pushed out of the way, you can undo your bottom ball joints, which are 18s. And what you're doing here is you're doing the ball joints so that you can pop them and get the axles out of the train. Of course, these had cotter pins in them, but I already took them out. It's loose. Yeah, buddy. Now, that'll let us pull the wheel out, or the strut and hub assembly out, and able to get the axles out. That's all we need, is that little bit of movement to get the axles to come out of the transmission. And actually, as you can see, the driver's side one already fell out, and so did the passenger. So, as you can see, it's just hanging out the bottom there, and that side's hanging out the bottom as well. And then they won't be in the way when we pull the motor and tranny out together. Then there's 3 motor mount bolts, actually transmission mounts. 3 bolts, they're 17mm. And you just take them out. You can see those 3 holes right there, and the one up there. Take those 3 bolts out, and this motor mount is free. 2 different size. Damn, Can't even get in there with a wrench. It's a 17. Man, I wonder who put anti-seize on those. That was moi. Last time I had this engine out. $14. Now the other side of this mount, this one right here, it's been broken for a long time. I just don't bother with it. My dirty ass car. I don't look forward to this. Alright. Oh look, when the engine was replaced and new water pump and stuff, yeah, that was a long time ago. Alright. See if we can shed some light on this subject. So we have these little clips on each side here. By the way, that's the radio code. If you disconnect the battery and you have a factory radio, your radio code should be right there. They should pry away like that. And then you can kind of jiggle it and pull it to the inside. Like that. See if I can hold the camera still and do it. And then it will, the whole thing will pull through. Then your glove box will invert itself. Okay, so you unplug this, which is this big wide one, and it's the gray one and this white one, and they both, the gray and the white, the little white one, plugged into the ECU there. They only fit in 2 plugs, so you can't really mess it up. But these are the 2 that have to come out through the firewall. Alright. Try to shed some light on the subject back in here. See that big rubber boot with all them wires running through it? Kind of get in here. Oh look, a daddy long leg. Kind of get in here and get a hold of it with your fingers and kind of work it out. Having these wires run through here gonna be a little bit of a problem. Never really thought of that until now. Oh well. You won't have this wires and these wires. You won't have these in your car if your car's factory. So just ignore them. So you'll just be pulling this out and those harness wires will come right out of there, no problem. So ignore those. I'm gonna stop the video here and remove them, disconnect them so I can get them out of this grommet because all this has to go with the motor. I'll be back. So here they are as you pull them out. Kind of have to pull one at a time out of the hole. This one here is kind of big, but basically these 3 plugs are the whole engine harness. Now I have another wire here that I need to disconnect to get it out of this loop, but like I said, this gray wire and these red wires you won't have if your car's stock. But that's it. That part of the harness comes out, and matter of fact, I'm just gonna snip that wire right now. So we're just gonna splice it again. But that'll get that out of here and get these wires out of the way. Like I said, you won't have these wires. None of this will be in your way. Basically, you just want this out. Now that's the engine harness. And now the engine is completely electrically disconnected from the car. And yeah, that's it. You just have that upper motor mount and that upper motor mount, and this puppy pulls right up out of here. That's what we're going to do next. I'm going to rig up a strap and we're going to yank this thing. Be back. All right, I got a strap contraption. There's actually a hook down here for hooks on the transmission mount. And then the other place is I just hooked the alternator bracket in the other. I have one going down to the back of the intake to a metal bracket just to try to support the engine front to back. But as of this point, I'm ready to pull the upper motor mount bolts. We're having ourselves a little bit of a downpour. So that motor mount bolt's a 17. Big old girl. But the cherry picker is holding the motor. And I got the shop dog out here. She's making sure that everything's copacetic. She was laying outside, but it started raining, so she hurries up and runs in here. It's hilarious. So we're gonna move over here. You can see this top motor mount bolt right here. It's just a single bolt. Of course, I can't get to it without an extension. And there she is. Motor's ready to be lifted out. Now, when you go to do this, you need to take your time. Make sure this AC line stays out of the way. And just do it little by little and make sure that you have all your stuff disconnected. Because you know what the cherry picker is. You can see it right there. I got these blankets on it, but it's homemade, and it doesn't care what it's lifting. It'll lift it, and it'll break anything that's not disconnected. It's the tensile strength tester. Now, pry bar will be your best friend in this situation. To pry the motor mount off here. That motor mount down in there, it's going to hang us up if we don't take it off. And it's always funny when you can tell you've had things apart. There we go. Just get that out of the way. Now's the time to check to make sure you got everything disconnected from the back of the intake. 'Cause if you don't, you're gonna find out real soon. Yeah, we're good. We are good. Yeah, it's a little more crooked coming out than I'd like it to be, but that's it. She's clear. Watch out, bird. There she is, guys. The greasy, nasty mess that she is. Hanging from the cherry picker. And there's the mess. That's basically how you get the motor out from the top in a 01 to 05 Honda Civic. Just a little bit of a how-to here. Let's get this thing sat down and checked out. Get the transmission and engine separated from each other. 'Cause that's the real reason we did this. But this is definitely a lot better than dropping it out the bottom, I think. Because now I don't need to get a front end alignment, for one. Two, I don't know, I just feel that this is the easier way. Maybe it's not, but to me it feels like the easier way of doing it. And with having this out, now's a great time to check everything. Everything from timing belt, water pump, you know, everything's accessible. Just, you know, anything that needs replaced, now's the time to do it, because it's really easy to get to. But I figured I'd show you guys how to do the way that I do it. This will be probably the third time I've had this engine out of this car this way. When I'm not filming, I can usually do it in about an hour and a half. Took a little longer because I was filming and that sort of thing and doing some other stuff while I was at it. But there she is, swinging from the cherry picker. Now we got to figure out where the leak's coming from. So once I get this thing tore down a little bit, I'll bring the video back in. Maybe I'll make a two-part for the engine removal, engine and transmission combination removal out of a 2004 Honda Civic. I believe it's the same for 01 to 05. This is a D17. Single overhead cam, but it has VTEC. Kind of a dog. But it's been a very reliable daily for me. Trying to think, it has 240 some thousand miles on it, and I am not easy on it by any means. I run the shit out of it. It's a 5-speed, so you know it's getting beat, and I throw it into corners much faster than it should be thrown into corners and everything else, but it just, you know, Alright, so what I'm going to do here before I take this car off the lift, then we'll put these ball joints back in, put the tires back on. That way this is a rolling chassis still. The dry shafts, the axles are still in, so the wheel bearings are still tight. And I'll be able to push and move this thing out of here. So I'm going to put the ball joints back in, and that way it's at least a rolling chassis. Because this isn't going to get done this weekend, and I don't like to keep my lift hogged up with projects. So, think with me. Yeah. Yeah, that's not too bad. So I'm going to snug these up and tightened up. Good enough. So I put all the rest of my loose parts. Any bolts that I had loose, I put back in the motor. Any bolts and stuff I had under the car, I under the hood there on the cowl, I put in my bin over there, and I'm going to put it in the trunk of the car and any other parts. But as of right now, I'm going to lower this to the ground and make it so it can be pulled outside. Basically what I'm going to do, because I don't know when I'm going to get to this. So now that she's back into a roller, I'm going to put the wheels back on and get her off the lift as it starts raining harder.